Good afternoon. I'm Nancy Juetten, and I've got a powerful question for you today. Do you want to convert more revenue from the relationships that you already have? Do you want to create more revenue from the relationships you have? And do you want to expand the network of people that you get to talk to so that you can make even more impact with your message? If you are nodding your head, yes, 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 that is exactly what it is that we're talking about today. And I couldn't be more delighted with the very special guests that we have, who I'll introduce you to in just a moment. If you and I are just meeting for the first time because you're watching this on YouTube or somewhere else, my name is Nancy Juetten. In addition to hosting this Learn More, Earn More show, I guide service-based professionals who are successful to book themselves on more of the right podcasts and broadcasts so that they can welcome more inbound client inquiries, so that they can have more leads and more sales without having to hire an expensive booking agency. And this is my genius. It's something that people come to me for worldwide. And if that's something you need, something to put on your calendar, is in mid-September, I'm leading the Podcast Visibility Live Lab and would love for you to take your front row seat. I'll be sure to share a link in the show notes so that you can participate. But enough of that about me. Let me tell you about our very special guest, Patty Farmer. We have been in each other's universe for, I don't know, a number of years. And we've only just recently found each other through conversation, as I was a guest on her podcast, and now she's a guest on mine. And what do you know? Reciprocity is a powerful thing. That's a value bomb that we're dropping right out of the box. So who is Patty Farmer? Patty Farmer is an award-winning marketing and media strategist, international speaker, podcast host, magazine publisher, 7-figure event producer, and a 5X best-selling author. She makes marketing and media profitable and not painful. Patty specializes in marketing and media strategies and works with small business owners, entrepreneurs, and speakers to attract and convert their ideal clients so they can make a bigger impact in life, in the world, and even bigger deposits in their bank account. She has created a network of over 130,000 connections while teaching thousands of entrepreneurs to connect, collaborate, and convert in less time to make more money while designing a lifestyle they want to live. She's been seen on the covers of magazines such as Accomplish, Unleash Your Bold, Be the Boss, Women Who Mean Business, and Expertpreneur. She was recently awarded the Global Business Strategist of the Year by Global Powerhouse Group in London, England, and named the number 3 in the top 10 media speakers you need to know, and awarded the International Speaker of the Year by the Public Speakers Association. Wow, drop the mic. We are in the company of greatness. I am so excited that you're here.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. I love it. I just love the name. Learn More, Earn More. What an amazing title. I love it. And I'm just really excited to be here. So thank you for having me.
Well, I'm really excited to have you with us today, because who doesn't want to convert more relationships to revenue? If you are watching live, say yes, 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 I want that in the chat so that we know that you are excited about the value that is about to drop. Now, there's so much we can cover, and we want to make sure that we also address questions that may be coming up from the audience. So if you are watching live, if you have specific, terrific questions about how to do this, please drop them in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them while we're live. And in the meantime, we have a few other questions we're going to address that I think are kind of global and powerful and meaningful, and will inform what next you do when accomplishing this objective. And I just can't wait to get started. All right. So, when you know better, you do better. So said Maya Angelou. There are people that are making connections today online and offline and unwittingly doing it completely wrong. What do you have to say about that? And what should we do differently or better to have better results?
Well, I love this question, actually. So thank you so much, Nancy. I would say that the biggest mistake that people make, there's 2 of them, actually. The first one is that they confuse networking with marketing, right? They're not the same thing. Also, marketing and sales are not the same thing either, right? So I think that is really important. But the biggest thing that I think is the mistake that I see people make over and over and over again is they start all their conversations with asking the wrong questions, right? We've all heard that if you ask better questions, you'll get better answers. And I think it's very important to ask questions that will get you to what the answers are that you need to know to move the conversation forward. So, for example, the biggest mistake I hear is when people start conversations with, what do you do? It's probably the most overused question and probably the worst question you can ask. I challenge all my clients to not ask that question. And here's why. When you ask somebody, what do you do? They tell you. They tell you what they do. And then when they're done telling you, they keep on talking, and it usually goes into sales. The reality is, the question you really want to know is, who do you serve? That's really the question, because now when you ask someone, who do you serve? It's not even about them anymore. Now it's really about the people they serve, and do you serve them too? So I think that's the first thing. And as long as I've gone that far, if you allow me, I'm going to tell you the 3 questions you should ask. I tell people all the time, I only have to talk to somebody for 5 minutes and I will know exactly what needs to happen next. And so I think that what happens is that we've all heard for years and years, it all happens when we have coffee together, right? But I'm going to ask your audience, and like, how many of you have ever had a meeting with someone, and whether it was virtual or in person, and when you left that meeting, you thought, oh my gosh, there's 90 minutes of my life I'm never going to get back?
Oh, that's never happened. I'm being sarcastic.
Exactly,
I'm being sarcastic.
Well, the reason why is because we didn't ask the right questions. Like, I'm all about having coffee. I love coffee, but I never go and have coffee with someone unless they've answered the right questions. And I love that you just picked up a coffee cup right then. I love that. So here's the thing. So my first question I always want to ask somebody is, who do you serve? Because now I want to know, who do they serve? Do I serve them too? And if I don't serve them, is there somebody in my network that serves them, that maybe this is an opportunity for me to serve them? So that's question number 1. Question number 2 that I like to ask people is, I know a lot of people, and if I was going to tell them about you, what would you want me to tell them? And the reason why I love that question is because now I know who they serve. And when I ask them that question, they're not going to be talking about their dog and all this other kind of stuff. If I said, I'm going to tell people about you, what would you want me to tell them? They're going to tell me the value they bring to the marketplace. Right. And now I know who they serve, and I know the value they bring to the marketplace. And then the third question I ask them is, what is your phrase that pays? And basically what I say, they look at me and I say, well, what I want to know is, what is different about you than every other person who does what you do? So here's the thing. If you ask those 3 questions and you know who they serve, the value they bring to the marketplace, and what's different about them than every other person, like, you know a whole lot now, and you know where to continue the conversation, right? And then here's how I wrap that up. And so this is kind of like my signature thing that I do. And so you have to kind of picture right now your business card. So picture your business card. Now, yours will be different than mine. So what I do is, on my business card, the top right for me is LinkedIn, the bottom right's Twitter, the bottom left is Instagram, and then Facebook. So yours may be different depending upon where you are. So when I'm wrapping up that conversation with someone, if we're in person, if we're not in person, I just ask the question, and I will say to them, so say we're at an event, I've asked you those 3 questions. We've literally been talking for less than 5 minutes. And I say to you, so Nancy, what social media platform are you the most active on? And when you tell me, and we're done wrapping this conversation up, I bend the card in the corner that you just told me.
Oh.
So now think of it. Think of, if you were at an event with 100 people and you've been talking to them and you went home, your only call to action is to look at that business card and connect with them on the social media platform they just told you where they are on all the time. So if you're on LinkedIn all the time, but that person you were talking to is on Twitter all the time, Like literally connecting on LinkedIn doesn't really do you as much good as if you connect where they said. You don't need to connect with every person on every social media platform. You need to just be where your ideal audience is and where they're the most active. So I did that in less than 5 minutes. And in that information they got and how they answered those questions leads me to know, do I want to have coffee with them or not? So I don't go have coffee with everyone. I spent 5 minutes of my time and I know exactly what I need to do next.
I love that. And I'm sure people are wondering, there are people that have gone on coffee dates out of a sense of obligation, or for whatever reason. If you determine in those first few questions that for whatever reason this is not a fit, do you have a phrase that pays that actually says, thanks so much for this quick call? I don't think we're a fit, but I can address. I mean, what do you say to people when you know that you don't want to have coffee with them?
Well, actually, for me, I usually am really gentle. And I just tell them that I just found what they said very, very interesting. But for me right now, I choose to only go and have coffee with someone when I can see where the synergy is. And I'll tell them, I'll say, it's not that I don't believe we have it. We just haven't had enough conversation yet to get us there. And so I want to honor you and honor your time. So let's connect on social and continue the conversation.
Oh, beautiful. That's so good. So these are such excellent questions to help qualify who you're going to have the opportunity to invest quality time within. And that's also important when it comes to talking to potential clients about having a discovery session or whatnot. Do you offer a discovery session to everyone who asks, or do you invite people to go through some kind of a process to make sure that the fit is right before you actually get on the phone?
Oh, I love that question. So I actually have an assessment. You're seeing it go across the bottom right there. And it is for me an assessment so they get to find out about themselves. Right. So what I want is I'm always a being of service. That's what's important to me. Contribution. I feel like if you lead with contribution, compensation will follow. So for me, I created the
Okay,
assessment
you got
just
to say that again. If you lead with contribution, the
compensation
compensation
will.
will follow. If anybody's watching, I see Teresa's live. Type that in. That's what I call a sassy soundbite. If you lead with contribution, compensation will follow. Bing, bing, bing. Sorry to interrupt, but I just had to call that out.
That's okay. So the reality for me is I would like it so that when people enter my world, that whether they never speak to me again or not, that they got value. That's why I have a magazine. That's why I do the podcast. There's a lot of ways that I want to be a resource for people. So this assessment for them is really for them to be able to come into my world and learn about themselves, learn about their business and stuff. And so I love to be able to have them take that assessment. There is a At the end of the assessment, they can choose yes or no to whether or not they would like to jump on a call with me. If they do, great. If they don't, they learn something, and that's great too. I've been of service. But if they do, now when I get on the call, and this is why I do it that way, is so that this way, when I get on the call with them, I can actually really offer value in our limited amount of time together, because now I have an opportunity to look at their assessment and see where I can really show up and be of value. And that is very, very important to me.
Well, it's such an important thing that you're doing. And I actually previewed your assessment before getting on today's call, and I recognized it as something that another of my amazing colleagues, Jane Duber, has been advancing for so long, is the value of assessment marketing. Because when people take an assessment and measure for themselves to what extent they are ready, able, and willing to move forward in another bold step forward, they're coming to that conclusion themselves. And the insights that they come to as a result of taking your quiz get them present to what's missing in their business or their lives. And the last part of your assessment, which is the most important part, is to what extent are you committed to taking action to address these kinds of things? That's where folks have an opportunity to say, I'm a tire kicker and have no interest in doing anything at all, but thanks for your time. Or this is an urgent problem and I'm serious about getting it solved. Can we please have a chat? If you have more people on the calendar that want to do that, you would have conversations with quality people every single day, wouldn't you?
Absolutely, because now you are qualifying them, but you're not just qualifying them for your time. Here's the thing, when they take it, now they know what kind of questions to ask you. So if you're on a coffee with somebody who is a marketing expert, right? And you just filled out this assessment and you looked at it and you're like, wow, I thought I was more skilled at this, or now I can see why maybe this isn't working for me, or, oh, wow, I do need to make a few changes here, but I'm doing this really, really good. Now, what were the questions that you would ask me? Would you ask me about the thing you're nailing and you're doing really good? Or maybe would you ask me about the thing that maybe you're not doing so well and ask for me to give you input? And I'm always going to serve you. So, one of the things about, I know a lot of people don't, but one of the things that I feel very, very strongly about is that a discovery call is not a sales call. They're not the same thing. And so for me, it actually says when people make the appointment that it is a pitch free, no sales zone. If we get on a call and somebody says, oh, Patty, I would love that, I'd like to talk about working with you, I'm always like, great, let's make another call for that. This is not a sales call. I told you it wasn't a sales call. And I really stay in my integrity in that, of letting them know that this is for me to be able to serve you. If through that we decide we want to have another conversation and I can help you, great. But that is what this is. And I know there's a lot of people who do discovery calls and they're really disguised as sales calls. And that is why people don't always like to get on the phone to have a discovery call, because pretty soon they have been burned before. And so I feel like stay in your integrity. If it's a sales call, say it's a sales call.
Brilliant. I love that. I love that. So, if someone is on their way to creating their first $100,000 in their business and they haven't broken through yet, they can easily get confused about all the kinds of tactics and strategies that are out there to accelerate their impact in all the ways that mean something to them. If someone's on that path, where's the best place for folks to focus so they can get to their objective with as little wasted time as possible?
So the first thing I'm going to say is hire a coach as soon as you can, right? As soon as you can afford it, as soon as you can, shorten your learning curve by hiring a coach. So that's what I'm going to say there. But with that said, I believe that we know that, for me, I always like to tell people, think of your business as an ATM machine. And if you think of it as an ATM machine, and in today's business environment, relationships are the currency. Are you making more deposits or more withdrawals? I think it's really important to think about that, right? Because we're all thinking about our business, but the reality really is, how are you building relationships? So there's a lot of talk now about social selling and there's social marketing. They're not the same thing. Social selling is the process of using relationships as part of your sales process. Social marketing is more of a one-to-many messaging, right? So social marketing is where you get your messaging right. You do things socially, whether that's in person or online, but it's getting your messaging right where you're talking to many, which is important too. I'm not saying that it's not, but social selling is really about cultivating one-on-one relationships. So I think that a mistake that people make is they don't realize who they're talking to. They do things on social, we'll just use that as an example. But the reality is, Nancy, that there are 5 stages in the customer journey, but the 3 that are the most important in the beginning really are awareness, interest, and evaluation. So awareness is when somebody is just becoming aware of something that may or may not be a problem for them. So talking to them, trying to sell to them doesn't make sense because they're just not even quite aware that they even have that problem. Right now, interest is where now they're a little bit more interested. They're becoming more aware and they're like, oh, you know what? I'm kind of interested about that. Maybe I should probably think about doing something about it. And evaluation is when they've made the decision to do something about it. And they're just evaluating whether you are the right person for them to solve that problem. So the thing is, you do need to have messaging in all 3 of them, but not at the same time and not in the same post. So you need to be really, really clear. Who am I talking to in this message? So you're talking to the one customer journey, one person at a time, and you're having a relationship with that person, because a confused mind says no. And so a lot of times we want to try to do the most because we're all talking about how much time we have. We only want to spend this much time. So we do all the wrong things by just throwing out all this stuff. And we're all like, well, I'm not quite really sure what that is. So I think it is really important to be super, super clear in your marketing that if you're going to use social to sell, and you should be, that you are definitely doing it correctly and that you are building relationships. So getting that down in the very beginning is very, very important.
So this whole term social selling has sort of come to my awareness in the last 6 months or so, where I previously was unaware of that topic. And as I've come to understand it, social selling is interacting with another human being in a direct message exchange on a social platform like LinkedIn or Facebook, where you would start a conversation. Hey, it's so good to have you in my Facebook group. What are you hoping to accomplish? Or what is the biggest challenge you're trying to overcome? And the person has the opportunity to respond and say, I'm really struggling with lead generation, or I'm really struggling getting my message dialed in, or I'm really struggling with this or that. And that opens the door for there to be some kind of a real conversation that happens in the context of a private message exchange. Is that what you think, or am I not getting that right?
I do think that there is that, what you're saying. But what I'm going to say is if somebody used that exact thing that you said, it could be perceived, dare I say, how I would perceive it, is that you only asked me those questions to get my answer so that then you could sell to me. I mean, it's almost like, oh, you asked me those questions like you really cared what my challenges were. But the reality is you only asked me those questions so then you could say, oh, I can solve that problem, which is sales. Right.
So
And
what
it's,
questions should we ask in a direct message to get a connection started that can go somewhere, whether it's to whatever the outcome is? Like, what do you do?
well, what I love to do is I really like to build a relationship. And so one of the things I do is I'm very intentional. So when I connect with someone, the very first thing I say to someone is, I really care about the people that I'm connected with, and quality is more important to me than quantity. So with that said, I would love to learn more about you. Please share with me something personal or professional to start the conversation. I really want to know. And,
Nice.
and I let them tell me whatever they want too. It's really about a conversation, right? Now, of course, once that happens, have I done my due diligence? Do I go check them out on social media and stuff? Of course I do. Right? I do. And, and there's a lot more advanced things that I do, but we're still talking about in the beginning. But the reality really is I never, and that's in caps, never will I try to talk to somebody about selling them anything at that point. And the reason is you don't know enough. You haven't had conversation to know what their problem is, to know whether or not you're their solution. Because if you think you do, it's about you and it's not about them. And it is always about them and not about you. And I don't think I can stress that enough. This is just a conversation. And I think it is really, really important for people to realize that sometimes people burn bridges by going too quick. And all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, you hear them or you see them say something on social, you're like, oh my gosh, I'd love to have talked to him about that, but you already burned your bridge. So the reality really is it's all about conversation. It's about community, right? And so I think that is important. And one of the things I like to do is I love to give first. And I know that concept has been around a long time, but I like to back it with action. And so for me, one of the things I love to ask them is, like, how can I serve you? Like, what is something? So one of the questions I will ask, if I get those answers and I feel like it is really somebody that I would love to cultivate as a relationship, I like to show up first. So I always love to say, what is something that I can do for you that would be a game changer in your business this month? Like, I want something specific. And if they say this or that, like, I'll either know somebody. Is that an introduction that I can make for you? What is that? Right. And sometimes they'll say, oh my gosh, I would love to be a guest on your podcast. Or, oh, I would love to this or that. And I'd be like, great. Like, here's the link. I'm more than happy. And when sometimes some stuff, I will literally tell people, pitch me. Give me your best pitch. I'll invite them to pitch me. It's not a guarantee. It doesn't mean that I'm saying yes, but I am opening the door and saying, pitch me. And they should do their due diligence to check me out to know what they should and shouldn't pitch. And I have to tell you, Nancy, I can't even tell you how many times people have not done their work and then pitched me and actually said, oh, Patty, I would love to come on your podcast and share with people all about marketing and how they should hire me to do their marketing. And it's like, did you even look to see what I do for a living? Right. And so I think that, that's when you really can tell. So I'm all about asking questions to let people step up or step out and let them do it on their own.
I love that. And I just want to go down this little rabbit hole here. You do have a very popular podcast, the Marketing, Media, and Money podcast. I was lucky enough to be a guest. I did see a pitch me post that you made in one of the podcast guest collaboration groups, and I responded. And what do you know? I was a guest on your show. But you have a very popular show. You've had over 100 episodes. You have a network of over 130,000 people. There's no absence of people that want to be on your show. When you are evaluating their various pitches, I mean, one of the ways you can cultivate relationships that can turn into revenue is to get on someone's podcast to have an opportunity to reach a much wider audience of people who can benefit from the message you have to share in the first place. So as long as you're here, you've already revealed, if you didn't listen to my show, how can you possibly pitch me? That would be one. But what are some other...
It says that in my form.
Yeah.
In my form, when somebody gets to the point where they want to do my form, there is a question on my form that actually says, have you listened to and or reviewed the podcast? And then it says in parentheses, this is the way I know if we're a good fit for each other. And I do that because what I really am looking for there is for them to have listened to it so they know what it is about, because it's all about being of service, right? And I want them to be able to do it. Now, I'm not saying that I won't let anybody on my show. If they say to me, no, I have not, it does not mean that I will not put them on my show. It does not. If they pitch me and what they have is something I believe my audience needs, I will certainly have them be on. I will probably say, hey, by the way, like, why haven't you gone and listened to my podcast? Right. I will do that probably, or ask them, what's the reason? Because the reality is you shouldn't be pitching shows if you haven't listened to the show. I mean, you don't have to have done a review, but I will tell you, going back to that pitch me podcast thing I did, that's the first time that I've ever done that, by the way. That was the first time I did it. And I did it mostly because I had a really, really busy month. And I was like, oh, let me see how this will work. I just wanted to test it. And I did. And I have to tell you, you were the first person I booked. And you did something that I thought, I just have to plug you, something that super stood out for me. And that was that, I don't know if people know this, but when you leave a review for somebody, sometimes it takes 24 to 48 hours before it shows up. It doesn't always show up as soon as they did it. You actually told me that you'd listened, told me the name of the person you listened. You mentioned something about it, so I knew you were telling the truth. And then you said, and I left you a review, and then you actually screenshot the review and left it there. Now, you stood out. There were only 2 people from that whole thing. We had probably like 80 people who answered that, and only 2 people actually made it to the podcast so far, you and one other person. And your podcast, mind you, because of the conversation we had, here we are today. But not only that, but you were one of my most popular episodes because of the conversation we had that started with you actually doing what you say you're known for and showing me that this is what I talk about. But guess what? I just showed you that what I do. And that really, you walked the walk and didn't just talk the talk.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. I do try to walk the talk as you do. And one of the things I like to say is, there's this movie, Airplane, remember way back when, where the plane's going down and someone says, does anyone have a Valium? And everybody says, I've got one. Like, when I look at those posts, like, here's a pitch me. And there's 45 people that say, pick me, pick me, pick me, which says absolutely nothing. So people that get over templated, I have people asking me all the time, can you please send me a template that I can use to save time pitching someone of influence, such as yourself? And if it feels like a template, it will feel like a template on the part of the person who's receiving it also. If you don't put some personality and some pizzazz and some perspective into the thing to demonstrate that you're actually paying attention, it doesn't serve you.
Oh, I have to tell you, one of the things that, we all have our own screening processes, right? Like people don't always know it, but we all have our screening processes, right? I mean, as somebody who puts on 7-figure events, believe me, Nancy, nobody gets on my stage that hasn't been on my podcast first so I can see how they work there, right? Before they're ever going to get on my stage, right? So there is a screening process, but one of the biggest ones in my form is where I ask people, this should be so simple. What do you want to talk about on my show? Like, what would you like to talk to my audience about? And then it actually says, please share like a description of what you want to talk about, and like 3 to 5 points that you would like to share. And I actually say in parentheses, if this question is not filled out, please do not hit submit. And they will, and I got to tell you, I say it very clearly. And then they will put in there marketing, podcast. Like they'll say one word, sales. That's all they say. And then they think that I'm going to do all this work and go search them and find them and come up with this whole thing. No, you want to be in front of my people, right? You want to be in front of my audience, do the work, right? So that's what I want to say. So I really want to say that if you really want to be in front of the right people, the best opportunities, really, you make money in one of 2 ways: revenue, cash, or opportunities. And I always like to say OP stands for other people's people. Do your work, make sure you're in front of the right people. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. I don't really care. It's not about being on the most amount of podcasts. It's about being on the right podcast. So making sure that that you're talking to the right people, and then really do the work to show them why. I have so many marketing people on my show. And the reason why is because they pitch me a different perspective or a slant, a different way, or something different they want to talk about. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's really, really great. I love it. I have a very abundance mindset. My people listen to my marketing, media, and money podcast because they want to know about marketing, media, and money. And if you can talk about another way to monetize, or another way to leverage media, or another way to master marketing, I want you on my show. It doesn't matter if you're my quote unquote competition, because I don't believe in competition, right? So for me, but you have to do the work. And if you won't do the work before you're on my show, you're not going to promote the show. You're not going to share it. Right. And so I know how much time and energy and money I spend promoting my show. There's a reason I have 130,000 people, because I really do. And I'm not asking somebody else to do more work than I'm willing to do. But if you're not going to leverage being on my show, then the reality really honestly is, why would I do anything else with you? So,
well, so this is so great. And I want to comment on something. I often say to my clients, it's one thing to get booked on the show and to rock the show, but where you will really distinguish yourself as a guest is what you do after the show airs. And here's a little ninja strategy, or a little thing that I've discovered in my own experience, which is when the show has aired, and I'm proud of it, I will share it in every possible way that I can. I will also find Facebook groups that are saying, hey, were you featured on a podcast? Why don't you drop it in? I will drop in the podcast that features my guest before I'll try to focus on myself. And here's the part that's the coolest part. Other influential hosts notice that I'm merchandising my guests in a winning way. And then they come out to me and say, not only do I want you on my show, but I can't wait to see what else we can do together, because I'm seeing it through from start to finish in a way that's world-class and unexpected. And that brings more people my way. I just got invited. Someone saw how well I was merchandising my most recent episode and said, wow, you've really got it going on. Will you be a guest on my show? And why does that matter as a host? Why don't you just make that clear for people in case it isn't inanely obvious?
Well, I do think it is kind of funny. And just so you know, Tuesdays in my Facebook group are the day Talk Tuesday that I let people do that. So just so that you know, in case you are paying attention, Tuesday is a day that you can do that in my group. I think it is very, very important. And I think even when you think that you know, right? I love it that not only do you want to get in front of people, and I know everybody talks about the millions of podcasts there are, and there are. But within your niche of what you do, right? One of the things that works really, really great is when people talk and say, you know what? I had Patty Farmer on my podcast. She was a great guest. And does she know how to promote? Whatever. And guess what? They're going to tell that to somebody else. And then that person is going to have them on their show. And then they're going to tell somebody else. And pretty soon, this is when you don't have to go do all that work. Very rarely, unless I really come across it, do I really have to spend that much time looking to be on other people's podcasts? It's really not that hard, right? And so I feel like it's because I've already done the work and people know that I will, right? Because people don't put all the money, a podcast, while it is a low barrier of entry, it's not free, right? We still put a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of work building those numbers and doing the things so that we can showcase the people who we put on the show. If somebody does that for you, the best way you can thank them is to promote it. But more importantly than that, why are you not leveraging it for your own business? Like, leverage it. And that really comes to one of the things that I think is really important. So you have to have a strategy, but you need to be able to leverage, and you should be leveraging every single thing that you do. And I'm going to tell you right now, here's a little asterisk right here, is leveraging does not mean make a post on Facebook. That is not leveraging. There's a whole lot more to leveraging than just putting a post on Facebook.
Well, since you've opened the door, would you like to share a couple of suggestions? Because one of the things that I wanted to add to what you just said is a host wants more listens, more 5-star reviews, more downloads, more ears paying attention or eyes paying attention to their show. You, as a guest, to the extent that you can influence that, you are the guest that they want to have back, because you saw it through from start to finish and you paid forward some currency that was valuable to your host. And I think to the extent that we can pay the currency back to anybody that we're doing business with, we can create a connection that's beyond the one night stand. It's a lasting relationship that can grow over the passing of time.
I think that is really important too, because one of the things, like, for example, here's one of the ways you can leverage it is, guess what? When we always want people to do things for us, but what if you surprised them and did something for them? So, I'm kind of ruining my surprise right here, but to make a point is, whenever I'm on a podcast, right, as soon as it launches and it's live, I will go leave them a LinkedIn recommendation. I go leave them a LinkedIn recommendation, and I actually say in it, what a great interviewer they were, what a great podcast they have. And I mention their podcast by name, like where it is and how much I enjoyed it and what great questions they asked. And, and I talk about them so that other people see it. And then there's a way to leverage that too. And when I sign it, if it's a podcast, for example, I will sign it, right? That I'm a podcast host and what the name of my podcast is. I do it, obviously, but I feel like it also gives you more credibility if I have a podcast and I'm saying how great a job you did. Because that's basically saying, I know what it takes to run a podcast. I know what it takes. And guess what? You're really good at it, right? It's not like when somebody's like your sister. I'm not saying your sister, but like, they just go
Right.
and leave a recommendation. You're like, whatever. Like, a lot of people think that when they do that they're promoting themselves. It does if you promote yourself. But if you just give credibility by saying, this is who I am, and I am saying this person did a great job. I got to tell you, a podcast host telling people that another podcast host is great is a fabulous thing. And people are going to listen to that more to somebody who's never been on a podcast before. Right. So
Yeah.
I think it is super important to do that. So that's one of the things that I do. And then I have this ninja signature tip that I always do, which is this. So, like I said, you don't just put it on Facebook. So one of the things that I like to do, I call it my sandwich trick. So this is my sandwich tip, which basically is this. Now, if you did your work and the reason you're on that podcast is because you serve the same market, which are the type of podcasts you should be on, right? If you've done that, well, then guess what? The other guests on there, there's a high percentage, not 100%, but a high percentage that they kind of serve that same market too. Okay, so what I like to do is, so say I am episode 50. After I promoted, we're doing all this, and now a few weeks have gone by. I like to keep on promoting things, right? That's called leveraging. I will literally go and see, well, if I was 50, well, who was 49 and 48 and who was 51 and who was 52? And then I go promote them who they may not even know me. And now I'm promoting their podcast. And I'm saying, but guess what? When they go to the episode page and they see 49, I'm right next to him 50, and they're going to say, wow, this is the person who just said how great they were. And guess what? Now maybe they'll listen to my episode as well. But I'm doing it in a serving way. And I literally now have 4 new times that I can be talking about that podcast and serving that podcast guest. And when I do, and those other 4 people, and I'll tag them if I can, I literally be talking about how great their thing was. And now they're sharing. And so reciprocity being what it is, not to say everyone will, but a lot of the time they'll be like, oh, thank you so much, Patty. You know what? I went and listened to your podcast episode and it was really great too. And now all of a sudden you've expanded that, right? And they may have a podcast too. And then you get to be on their podcast and they're like, wow, that was really great. I think I want you on my podcast. So there's a lot of different ways that now I'm expanding my reach by giving first.
So good. So good. So now I want to, so you're clearly a 7-figure earner. You've got multiple pots on the stove. You're operating at a very high level, very high emotional intelligence. We're going to step out of the person who's moving towards 100,000 and we're going to move towards someone who's heading towards 7 figures. Okay. These kinds of people convert relationships to revenue differently. There are strategic partnerships, there's joint venture partnerships, there's all kinds of other things. It's such a big bucket. Where do you think you want to take this conversation in that regard to share where people should focus if that's where they are?
Sure. So I think now we shift to what I call the table of 12. So I probably won't be able to go all into that, but this is something that I teach all the time, and it's really about partnership. So the thing is, there's promo partners, there's affiliate partners, there's strategic partners, there's referral partners. There's a lot of different partners, and somebody can be more than one of those, but we need all of them. You need all of them. So the reality really is that one of the things you need to do is find people who serve the same audience as you in a different way. And what is it that they can bring to the table that you cannot? So I'll give you an example. So I do marketing, media, monetizing. That's my secret sauce, so to speak. But one of the things I don't like to do, so think about what you don't like to do. It's the last thing on your list you get to because you don't love it or you're just not good at it, like wherever that is. And for me, that's writing copy. I'm a speaker. And if I can speak from my heart. But when I have to like sit there and write words, it's why I gave myself grace. I have a magazine. I don't blog. I don't blog. I gave myself grace. I said, I'm just not going to blog. I gave it up. I feel so great about it. I love it. Right. And so for me, whenever I'm going to do anything, believe me, in my wheelhouse, I have such great relationships with other people who write copy. So when I'm doing something, I just have to reach out and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm looking for somebody to come be a part of it with me. We are going to be able to get it to the marketplace faster, right? By having somebody collaborate with me who does copy. So that's one thing that I think is really, really important, is to identify your strengths, but it's also just as important. There's opportunity in where your strengths are not. A lot of people don't realize that where your strengths are not is a huge opportunity where there are gaps. And it's something I work on with my clients all the time. Let's stuff those gaps with money. right? And where are they, right? So knowing who is a promotional partner, what kind of partner is really, really important. So I think that is one way, because now you shorten your learning curve, you get to the marketplace faster. So I think that is really important, is to be working on partnerships. That's where you need to be spending your time. Dare say, I'm going to tell you that I know how to have a conversation with people about finding out what I need to know about what kind of partner they are. I'll ask them questions. What kind of joint ventures have you ever done? You ask somebody about joint ventures or collaborating, they will tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm going to tell you. And I want to know that, because if somebody is not ever going to be a good partner for me, well, I probably know 15 people who do what they do, right? So it's not like I don't want to have anything to do with them, but I'm always looking at where can our relationship build and where can I serve at a greater level? Where can I put them in front of my people, right? And where can they put me in front of theirs, where we're both being serving at the highest level? So I think that what happens, and here's kind of like an example, and it's kind of a strong one, but bear with me. So here's what I always like to say. Early on in my business, and this will really affect people who are coaching, and don't beat me up, anybody, because this is kind of a true statement, whether you want to admit it or not. But here's what happens. There's times in your business where you have more time than money. There's times in your business where you have more money than time, right? And sometimes in the coaching world, it kind of can sometimes go like that, right? But here's the thing. What I found early on is I am a coach, but I really stay in my lane for marketing and media. So I coach as a verb. That's what I love to tell people. I coach as a verb, even though I am certified coach. But I really like to stay in the marketing and media space, right? But here is the thing that I know to be true, Nancy, which is early on in my business, if there were people who hired me and they didn't have a lot of money, and I was kind of like the magic bullet, and they were kind of hoping that, oh my gosh, this was going to be it, and I was going to help them, which I did. But here's what I knew. They wanted to be on the phone all the time, like all the time. And they wanted to be able to have all this access to me. And can I do this? And every single thing they did, they wanted to be able to call me on the phone. Like that's just what they needed, because they had all this time while we were building that for them. But what I found out is, as my business shifted and I raised the bar in my business, I find now that it isn't about that. It's about value, right? And having a value-based business. And now sometimes my clients, they'll get on the phone and they'll be like, okay, Patty, this is what I did. This is what you told me to do. And I did it. And this is what happened. What's the next thing I do? And then I tell them, like, okay, got to go. And I'm like, that's it. They're like, time is money. And literally they just want, what's the next thing to do? They don't care if our call's an hour. They're like, no, I got what I needed in 10 minutes. I need to go do what I need to do. And so really, honestly, when people think that the value that you bring is based on the time you spend with them, that is not the right person for you. And you need to level that up right away. Right. So it's really about, are you going to implement? Are you going to take action? What's the next step you need to take? And that's always what it is for me. So when somebody tells me they want to get to 7 figures, then is every action we're taking getting you closer to 7 figures? Or are you just being comfortable? Because the reality is, you can't deposit potential in the bank. Right. So and you can't pay your rent or your mortgage payment with it either. Right. So the thing is, they just want money. Like, so I always like to say, people say, well, Patty, like you focus a lot on monetizing and money. I do. But here's why I do. So I always want to be really clear, is that I believe that there's things that we do that generate revenue, and there's things that we do that feed our soul. And I believe there's things we do that feed our soul. You don't need to make any money for that. It just feeds your soul. And I'm very, very clear about what those things are to me. But guess what? If when you are doing revenue generating activities and they actually generate revenue, you can have more of those activities that feed your soul. It's when you mix them up that the problem is. So I think that as you're growing your business and you're raising the bar, you want to surround yourself with people. Like, that whole expression that says, if you're the smartest people in the room, the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. That is so true. You want to get with people who make you feel uncomfortable. You need to be in the right communities. This isn't where you need to be in 50 million Facebook groups. You need to be in less things, but be more involved in them. And then if you are in a Facebook group or a LinkedIn group, here's the thing. You could sit there and do what I've seen done. I'm kind of being hardcore on this, so I hope it's okay. You can actually troll through and try to wait for somebody to ask a question that then you could say, oh, pick me. I can be the answer to that. Or guess what? You could actually build a relationship with the host of that group and talk to that host and say, what's the purpose of you having this group? What is your goal? How can I help you and serve and support you? And that person will ask that of you, and they'll introduce you to everybody in their group that they need to know. If somebody says that to me, I can tell you everybody in my Facebook group. If you tell me what you're looking for, I'll tell you, oh, well, here's the first 5 people that you should connect with. Or you could just sit there and do promo threads and try to say things like that. That's how you get to the first 50,000, not even the first 6-figure. That's how you get to 50,000. You want to one up that, you need to be talking to the people you need to talk to. So I always like to say, if you're looking at a guru or you're looking at somebody that has what you want, don't do what they do. Think like they think. That is the name of the game. Think like they think, apply it to what your goals are. What are your dreams? Why are you doing what you're doing? Right? I think that's what's really, really important is why are you in business? So my mission is that I want to help 1 million women design the lifestyle they want to live and then build a business that supports that lifestyle, not the other way around. Because we don't all want the same lifestyle. We don't all want the same things. So you need to be super clear on what you want. Surround yourself with those people, join a mastermind, hire a coach, and don't do activities that you don't need to be doing.
Amen. Preach, my friend. Now, there's one more thing I want to touch on before I know you have a client appointment that you have to be on right at the top of the hour. You do have this very meaningful magazine, and I know that you have tapped a number of people around the globe to be contributing writers to the magazine. What do you want to tell us about the magazine? And if people want to subscribe to the magazine, what can they do?
Thank you so much for asking that. So the thing is, you can't serve everybody, right? And so I always want to have resources. So the concept and the premise for the magazine is that I like to have people write for the magazine, whether they're a columnist or a guest author, and we have both, but they have to be willing to share what is working now, not 5 years ago, not 2 years ago. What is working right now that you can share with them to help people to grow and scale their business? That's what's important to me. Right now, while we were getting it to that 100,000, like I said, it's 130,000. Right now, we're giving away lifetime subscriptions to the magazine, and they can just grab that by going to marketingmediamoney.com. No, and just marketingmediamoney.com. They can grab that. At the end of this year, we're actually moving it over to an app. And at that time, there will be a cost involved, very minimal, 99 cents an issue, so not a whole lot of money. But everybody who has that subscription now will be grandfathered in for life.
So marketingmediamoney.com is how you can subscribe to the magazine. And I'm imagining that there are people here that would be interested in learning how they could be a columnist or a contributor. If they go to that website, is there a tab that they can select so that they can inquire about that?
No, actually, to write for the magazine is pretty much to be a columnist by invite only for sure. But I always encourage people to pitch me. If you feel that you can serve my people, this is a great time to just reach out to me on any social media platform and just say, you know what, Patty, I would love to have a conversation with you about writing for your magazine. I'm always open for that and stuff though. So that's a conversation if you feel, but again, like the podcast, don't try to come to me and try to pitch me about writing for my magazine if you've never even read it. So go look at it and read it first, because the first thing I'm going to do is go look and see if you have, and I can tell. So if you're going to pitch me, don't just do it to try to see what you're serve and be a part of it. It doesn't cost you anything but time. So
well, I always say that if you want to be seen, heard, celebrated, and ultimately compensated in any meaningful way, first see, hear, and celebrate the people of influence who have the power to bring you to their magazine, to their stage, to their podcast. A template won't necessarily take you all the way from Oz, all the way to Oz from Kansas, if you don't put something behind it that lets them know that you actually paid attention.
That's what I say too.
Attention.
Yeah,
right?
my tagline is plug in, power up, get paid, right? So I always say, if you have somebody who has all these things just like you do, plug into them. Let that power you up, ramp that up. That's how you're going to get paid. People do notice when people keep showing up and like, wow, that person keeps showing up. All you don't even, it may even be me reaching out to you and saying, you know what, I've been seeing you around, right? And so I think that is really, really important because we didn't get to where we are without serving our people. And if you have something that serves our people, we want to know you, right? It doesn't matter if you make $50,000, if you have something different, a different perspective, because it's just as important to know what not to do as it is to
Yes.
know what you do. So if somebody has a story, right? Facts tell, stories sell, right?
Patty, you are the bomb. I
Thanks.
just have to say. And so I want to thank Teresa for being our scribe today. She has indicated all the links that you shared. And the one that's scrolling across the bottom of the screen is the one where people can go get the biz quiz that will help them evaluate where their gaps are and to what extent they are committed to having you help bridge them as their marketing mentor and guide, correct?
Absolutely.
So I just want to thank you so much for your generosity. You've been an amazing guest. I'm super, super excited that we got to have this conversation. In a moment or two, we'll be rendering this, so we'll be placed on YouTube, and I'll be sharing it out in all the ways that I can so it will get a much wider audience. And if you are someone who has not yet decided to join me for the Podcast Visibility Live Lab coming up in mid-September, write this down, podcastvisibilitylivelab.com. Just claim your front row seat, and I'll be showing you more and more about how you can be visible as a podcast guest and smile all the way to the bank. What I do is just a small subsection of what it is that Patty teaches, and that's why we're such wonderful partners. Find people that do more things than you do. You'll have all kinds of opportunity to have conversations with people of significant influence. And who knows what will happen when the microphone goes silent and what other amazing co-collaborations that will take shape between us and between you and the people that you talk to, so that you can have a wider audience, make a bigger impact, and have the lifestyle and the business that you've always dreamt. So thank you, Patty, for being here. Thank you, those of you who've joined me live. If you're joining by replay, let us know what questions you have. Patty is a member of the Raise Your Voice, Make Your Impact Facebook group. We have movers and shakers here. So be sure to ask a question and tag her if something came up that you needed to have addressed that was missed for whatever reason. And with that, thank you so much, Patty, for being here. You were amazing.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed myself, so I really, really appreciate it. And I look forward to continuing the conversation between you and I, and we already have it on the book, so that's really great.
Yes, amen. All right, well, that's it for today. We'll see you next week for the Learn More, Earn More show, and I just want to let you know who's coming on next week. You know what's happening next week? This is exciting. The Broadcast Your Brilliance boot campers are coming on live to demonstrate what it is to make a 1-minute audio pitch to a podcast host and get booked. And you're going to love meeting them. It's going to be a really unusual call, but you're going to meet some amazing people who are broadcasting their brilliance and making magic happen. And I can't wait for you to join in and see what the fuss is about. That's happening 1 week from today, 1 o'clock. And I look forward to having you join us to get the wow from that. All right. Thanks so much. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.